Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be continuing our PvP stats guides, and we're going to be going through the agent slash smuggler specs and looking at the min-max stats and tacticals, legendaries, and everything for the specs. So first we have Dirty Fighting slash Virulence. We're looking at our critical being at 4100. Past 4100, Mastery starts outperforming crit. So we want to do everything we can to hit that 4100 point. After that, we are going to be pumping our mastery as high as possible. Mastery basically doesn't have a DR. You really just can't hit it right now. It's kind of a flat curve, as you can kind of see on the right. After that, we want to have our alacrity at the general GCD breakpoint of 7.14%. Again, you can go a little bit higher if you experience some lag or anything like that, but somewhere between 7.14 and 7.2 is generally good. You can go up to 7.5 without any problems, depending on connection speed. Accuracy, for PvP, we don't need any in the spec. The spec does a lot of yellow damage. It isn't really checking anything defense chance-wise against anybody. Most of its abilities, defense doesn't matter, so we're not running any accuracy. Our crystals and everything that we're going to be putting in our weapons are going to be mastery crystals, just because we should be hitting the crit with our gear and our mods. Our relic slot 1 is going to be our crit relic, and then slot 2 is going to be mastery. They just both perform very well with this spec. Tacticals, we're looking at two different ones. You have a single target and an AoE option. It's really up to you. You can use either one. Both of them are fine. Just suits your playstyle, kind of what map you're in. We're in more of a cleave map. You can go with AoE. If you're more looking for some single target damage, you can go with the single target one. So we have exploited weakness for our single target and airborne agents for our AoE. Legendaries, there's not a lot of choices really here. They're pretty standard. A lot of you see when we go with the operative specs, they're going to basically almost all use locked and loaded. And then the second one kind of changes just depending on the spec. So we're just going to be locked and loaded and then improved targeting. Next on our list, we have engineering slash saboteur. The crit moves a little bit in this spec, so it actually moves about 200 points to 4,300. After we get to 4,300 crit, again, mastery starts outperforming critical, so we want to pump our crit to 4,300, then put everything else into mastery. Our alacrity is going to remain at the normal GCD breakpoints, so we're 7.14%. Again, you can go up to 7.2, 7.5, just depending on how your lag goes. Just make sure you at least hit the 7.14. Very important. Anything below that is kind of wasted. Accuracy, we don't need accuracy in the spec. The spec does a lot of yellow damage, so we don't need accuracy in PvP. Crystals, again, we're going to be running mastery crystals because we should be hitting that crit pretty easy. You're actually generally going to run into a problem with a lot of specs that you're going to have too much crit. So mastery, relic slot 1, we're going to have our crit relic. Relic slot 2, we're going to have mastery, just best in slot there. Our tactical, ruthless interrogation is the only option for this spec. And then again, if we look at our legendaries, we are looking at locked and loaded, which is just very strong. And then energy regulators, it just helps us keep our energy up. The spec is very energy heavy. Definitely recommend going down that route. Next on the list, we have Marksman slash Sharpshooter. Honestly, just don't play this spec. But if you have to, the numbers are pretty much just going to mirror engineering. They're pretty much dead on as far as the diminishing return. So our crit rating is going to be at 4,300. After that, Mastery is going to start outperforming it. Once we go ahead and get a 4,300 crit, we'll stack mastery as high as possible. Our alacrity, it's going to be the same. Honestly, this spec, you can make an argument that you don't have to run alacrity, that you could just use the normal GCD, just because you could pump mastery higher and pump crit higher and everything else higher, just because the spec doesn't have damage. You can make that argument for PvP, because in PvP you're not really looking for the sustained damage. You can make an argument for not running alacrity. But alacrity does do a lot more overall DPS, just a sustained basis, even though this spec really doesn't do damage right now. So alacrity is 7.14%. Again, you can go up to 7.5 depending on lag. Again, you can even drop it completely. This is one of the few specs that I would say that alacrity you can completely drop, and it's not going to affect you that much in PvP. Accuracy, you want 105. The spec does a lot of white damage. Anytime you have a spec that does a lot of white damage, we want to run 105 just to get past some defense, some base defenses chests that other classes have, and some tank and debuffs. Crystals, again, we're going to go Mastery because we should easily get to 4300 crit. Relic slot 1 should be crit. We're a burst class. Relic slot 2 should be Mastery. Our tactical is just agitating energies. There's not really anything amazing. You can use other tacticals if you want. That's just the one that's been the best so far. That everyone's pretty much agreed on is the best so far. You could definitely get by with trying something else. The spec's just not in a good shape, so you can try whatever you want. Our legendary is locked and loaded and improved targeting just for DPS. There's also the option, the spec's kind of energy heavy, that you could run energy regulators. You can also do that. Like I said, the spec just isn't very good. It doesn't really have a good flow right now. So the basic of this spec is basically 4300 crit and then pretty much 105% accuracy. After that, you can kind of play around with the tacticals and legendaries and the alacrity as well. I would just make sure we get the accuracy and the crit up to where it needs to be. And then the relics are just best in slot. So crit and accuracy are just best in slot for the class. The other things you can kind of play around with. Next, we move into Concealment / Scrapper. The curve on this is actually pretty much dead on what engineering does. So crit 4300, mastery outperforms it after 4300, so we get to our 4300 crit. Our alacrity is pretty standard, or 7.14%. Accuracy, we don't need accuracy on Concealment and Scrapper. Some people make the argument that you can run 105. It's perfectly doable, but the way that the spec works, you really don't need it. The cooldowns can be reset, and a lot of times you're going to be coming out of stealth with full cooldowns, and you really want to burst people down in one goal, so just the extra stats really help that. And the fact that you don't have much defensives means you're not really staying in a fight. I mean, if you miss an attack in this spec, you're probably going to lose anyway. So, crystals, we want mastery. Relic slot 1, we want crit. Try to burst people down. Relic slot 2 is mastery. It just outperforms power in this spec. Tacticals, kind of have a choice. You can go acid latch or explosive cells. Both are fine. Acid latch, more single target. Explosive cells, if you want to go more AoE route. Completely up to you. Most people are running acid latch, but explosive cells, honestly, is pretty much on par with it. It's very close. Our legendaries are pretty just locked and loaded. We're pretty much running for all of our operative and smuggler specs, and then tactician. And then finally we have lethality / ruffian. It's gonna kind of mirror dirty fighting and virulence. The stats pretty much break out to the same. So our crit 4100. After 4100, mastery outperforms crit. We're not really putting anything into power. Mastery is just straight up better at every point in stage. Alacrity, our normal alacrity, 7.14% to 7.5, somewhere in that area. Accuracy, don't ever run accuracy on this spec. If you're running accuracy, you're trolling. Our crystals, we're going to be running mastery in both our crystals. Relic slot 1, we want crit. And then relic slot 2, we want mastery. Our tactical, you can kind of get away with it. Almost everybody runs viral elements just for the AoE of this spec. But if you do notice you're getting to a lot more single target engagement, Sinnock shots can definitely work better at that point. But I would recommend running viral elements. This spec is a cleave spec. It's really what you should be doing. It's not a terrible thing to run the shots tactical though. You can do it. Our legendaries, pretty standard, locked and loaded, and tactician. Same thing with pretty much all the operative specs. Locked and loaded is just very good. And then tactician just helps out overall with the spec and smooths everything out. If you guys have any questions or comments or anything you guys would suggest, go ahead and leave it down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and everybody have a good day.